Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. We've got the great Ryan Grimm in for Crystal Ball. It's great to see you again, Ryan. How are you, my friend?
It's going to be amazing. Great to see you.
It's always amazing. It's always amazing when the two of us are together. And we've got a great show for everybody today. We've got some great guests, but we want to get to a very interesting story that came across all of our radars really yesterday. This is the developing one down in Georgia, not necessarily with the primary, but the intersection of the Trump team, the legal team in particular, Sidney Powell, or I guess she's been disavowed by the Trump legal team, but Sidney Powell and her efforts in order to find some Dominion voting problems, the Kraken and all that. She held a rally yesterday, a crowd of hundreds. It's from our friend of the show, Greg Bluestein. He was there. Hundreds gathered at this park in order to hear from Sidney Powell, where she talked about election fraud and more. But what really caught my eye is what her and attorney Lynn Wood had to say in terms of whether GOP voters should even vote in that upcoming runoff election. Let's take a listen.
I agree. There should not be a runoff, certainly not on Dominion machines. I think I would encourage all Georgians to make it known that you will not vote at all until your vote is secure. And I mean that regardless of party.
If Kelly Loeffler wants your vote, if David Perdue wants your vote, they've got to earn it. They've got to demand publicly, repeatedly, consistently, Brian Kemp call a special session of the Georgia legislature, and if they do not do it, if Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue do not do it, they have not earned your vote. Don't you give it to them. Why would you go back and vote in another rigged election? For God's sakes, fix it. You gotta fix it before we'll do it again.
There you go, Ryan. Nightmare scenario. We covered it on Monday, and there are hundreds of people at that rally. There's a lot of people that were there. You know, it's funny. I just anecdotally, while on Thanksgiving, I walked past a wall where people were writing what they were thankful for. And several of the people were thankful for Sidney Powell. This is a totally true story. People were posting little Post-its. I'm putting like my dog, you know, that type of thing. Several of them, Sidney Powell. This is resonating much deeper than I think a lot of people can understand. This actually could have a significant impact upon the vote there in Georgia. Remember, Georgia only went 14,000 votes for Joe Biden. I mean, that is just not a lot of votes. Razor thin margin. David Perdue's was like 49.99997 or something. If he had won just slightly more votes, boom, no runoff in the first place. So this could be highly destructive. And Ryan, already starting kind of a civil war. Newt Gingrich tweeting this morning, quote, Lynn Wood and Sidney Powell are totally destructive. Every Georgia conservative who cares about America must vote in the runoff. Their don't vote strategy will cripple America. So there you go.
Yeah, you live by Facebook, you die by Facebook.
Yep.
You're right that it's really hard for us to know, with any certainty or any precision, just how deep this sentiment runs. But we do know that across Facebook, thanks particularly to Newsmax and OANN, and to people like Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood, who have genuine, serious credentials and credibility within the Republican Party. Sidney Powell herself was, an attorney for the president up until just a couple of weeks ago. Lynn Wood is the kind of go-to attorney that Republicans have turned to for decades when they're having all sorts of different problems. He's like the fixer extraordinaire. So these are not they might be cranks now, but these weren't cranks just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And it's the same story of every time that an establishment element tries to play footsie with a more extremist element in their midst and thinks that they can control them and use them to their benefit. The Sorcerer's Apprentice was about this, and this is the kind of broom getting out of the bucket and just mopping everything up.
No.
Whether or not it floods them in Georgia, we'll find out in January.
No, you're right. I mean, look, you tweeted this already. The absentee ballots are trending Republican. If I had to bet, I think Republicans are going to be fine. But this is an interesting case where, again, it's fascinating to me because it's almost like a replay of the whole, like, should progressives vote for Biden thing that we covered a lot here on this show. And, Crystal and talked a lot about. And there it was all about in terms of leverage. And in a fascinating way, the people who are diehard Trump supporters, really only there for Trump and not for a Republican Party whatsoever, I mean, they feel legitimately aggrieved. They're like, hey, what Lin Wood said. He's like, look, if they don't stand up for Trump, why should we come out and vote for you? And of course, I mean, I had guests on this show yesterday, and the Senate does matter. It actually matters quite a bit in terms of how things are going to go there. And it's funny in a way because when you tie yourself so hard, I mean, this has always been the problem for Republicans, is that the base trusts Trump much more than they trust the party establishment, because Trump actually accurately represents what they want and the party establishment doesn't. That disconnect really coming back to bite them this time around.
Yeah, one of the interesting voters to watch in this primary will be the people, and there were hundreds of thousands of them, who came out and voted for Biden, but they weren't necessarily voting for Biden; they were voting against Trump, and then they voted for Perdue and Loeffler. There were these split ticket voters all over the country, as we saw. That's
yes.
why you were able to see Republicans hold on to a lot of their Senate seats, pick up House seats, yet also lose the presidency by 7 million votes at this point. So what do those voters do? They have a couple of choices. One is why bother voting? You already went out, you split your ticket. Let them sort it out from here. The other is, okay, well, I split my ticket in November, but Republicans look like complete crazy people right now.
Yes.
So maybe if I go out this time, I'll split my ticket again. I'll vote for Warnock and I'll vote for Perdue, or I'll vote for Ossoff and I'll vote for Loeffler. If you have enough of those people, that can narrow that gap between the two different candidates.
That's a very important point, which is that there are hundreds of thousands of people, especially in the suburban areas. Suburbs all went in for Biden. Perfect example, I think, is like Omaha, what is it, Nebraska too, where Omaha is, right? Where the GOP congressman wins, and Biden wins it by 6 points, which means that's a large margin. That's suburban population across the entire country, especially in places like Atlanta, in places like around, the big cities in North Carolina, Charlotte, those types of places. I saw this split ticket voting all across the map, and it's one of the undertold stories about that big divide in the GOP, which is, Trump can run up, he can run up like Mahoning County in Ohio. He can win it, but he also lost a decent amount of votes in the suburbs, and just enough where in a razor-tight thin, it came off to be a problem for him. I saw Josh Dawsey, he's a political reporter, he's tweeted this, that both, Lin Wood and Sidney Powell may be in-kind contributions for Democrats in Georgia. And actually, that's not even a joke, because just yesterday I saw that a Democratic super PAC is running billboards in Georgia being like, don't vote, the election is rigged. I mean, genius, right? It's a genius move on their part, the dirty tricks of politics. But if it all comes down to such tiny little percentages, this could make a huge difference. Right, and you don't just have billboards. They could be pushing that video that you showed at the top of this segment around Facebook. Just pump, they have endless amounts of money that they can spend in this race, and put a couple $1 million into spreading that message to the right kind of voters on Facebook. And if like you said, it's all about the margins. You don't have to convince every Republican, and you're not going to convince every Republican in Georgia that is rigged and that they shouldn't vote. But if you can get to 10 or 20,000, in a close race, that makes the difference. And these runoffs are, significantly about turnout, despite what we were just saying about the split ticket voters. Democrats historically have not been able to persuade their voters to come back out for a runoff. They come out for the general election. They don't come out for the runoff, whereas Republicans are more in the habit of voting. If that holds, Republicans win. If something changes, Republicans lose,
And this is the thing that could really undermine them, and that's aside from the scandal, which we'll talk about later in the show.
No, you're exactly right. And I think this is very important. And just last thing, I mean, this stuff is going deep. Like, I want people to understand. We talked about here how that election certification is going to happen on December 14th. But Congress has to certify those results on January 6th. Well, we already know at least one representative, let's throw this up there on the screen, Congressman Mo Brooks plans to challenge the Electoral College votes when Congress officially certifies Biden victory on January 6th if he can get a senator to join. Let's throw the other one up there. Of course, this is not going to make a difference. You know, even if he does, they won't actually be able to overturn the results. But Trump's allies can at least cause some mischief on the floor. And it's very certain that this is not over. And I just want people to understand that this is a deep and, running current within the GOP right now, and I think it is going to cause problems for that party. I don't have a lot of sympathy in a lot of ways. It's not like I'm a big lover of the establishment or anything, but you reap what you sow.
And one point that shouldn't be forgotten: election security is a real thing.
Yeah,
we ought to have paper ballots. Like there ought to be a way that people can have faith that their vote is actually going to be counted. So I don't think Dominion and Hugo Chavez and the Venezuelan elite are stealing this election. But why even allow that to hang out there? Just do paper ballots everywhere.
I'm 100% with you. I think I saw Glenn Greenwald tweeting this. They had elections in Brazil. They had the results like 3 hours later, and nobody had a question about it. Meanwhile, New York absentees dropped like yesterday. Yeah. It's been a month. Yeah. What are you doing? What a nightmare. Anyway, we'll have more Rising for everybody right after this.